Hello, welcome to Rosie's Preserving School, and today I'm going to show you how to make a chili sauce. It's my method of making a chili sauce. It's pretty much different to everyone else's, but I do find it quite simple, quite effective, and why make hard work for yourself is my view. We'll be going through that in a moment. I did look up, I thought, well, what can I tell you about chilies? Not a great deal, really, because it's so personal and all the heat thing, and I think it's the Scoville chart, isn't it, of the heat, and everybody's got their favourites and particular ones either that they grow or they buy, and then there's all the competitions. I don't know of any other cooking item that evokes so much conversation, competition, and downright argument. So I'm not going to go there about, chilies are chilies. You choose the one that you like and however hot you want it. And there isn't any point me guiding you on that because it is very subjective. But I did have a look. I thought, what does Jane Grigson have to say about it? Because Jane Grigson is, or was, I presume, the mother. I know she was the mother of Sophie Grigson. I don't think she's any longer with us, but she really was one of the early pioneers of the more adventurous, not adventurous in a mad way, but in a broader sort of range of things to make, because like Elizabeth David, who preceded her and actually sort of was out the front with the flag showing the way, she very much either visited or lived in Mediterranean areas, and that has influenced all the cooking that she did. I looked up the chilies in here, and I read what I never expected to read, and it made me stop and think, because I'm in my late 60s now. So I've been around a while, and her first thing was that chilies, given that these books are a reprint of earlier editions, so she was talking in a contemporary way of when she wrote it, and she said it wasn't until fairly recently, i.e. the late 50s, that anybody in the UK had even known of the existence of a green bell pepper or a red one. I mean, it's a bit like avocado. It was so exotic. If you went to the shop, there weren't really supermarkets that widespread at those times. On offer, well, it would be in the greengrocers, there would be lettuce and cucumber and tomatoes, and that would be the base of your salad. And you'd have a dish of cucumber, which would be peeled and floating around in some vinegar or something. And it was just, that's what it was. It was very plain, just salad. My mother hated, and my father would say, oh, let's just have a salad. And she said it would take her half the afternoon to prepare it because it was all grown, in the garden, in the earth. So she'd have to wash it really carefully and then try and dry it off so it wasn't all wet. And she said the preparation in a salad was enormous, and she just hated it. So we very rarely had salad. But that made me stop and think. I thought how much our lives have changed, the sort of food we eat has changed, that we now just take for granted. And of course, those bell peppers were the precursor to chilies. Similarly, nobody used chilies. You didn't put chili in everything. And it took a very long time for chili to get into our psyche as an ingredient and a sort of everyday ingredient. It's quite fascinating how the whole tastes of a nation can be changed, really fundamentally, by one person, Elizabeth David, introducing us into these things. And of course, she was a bit of a cult in her day. And what she did, people wanted to copy. And it was like later on with Delia Smith and then Mary Berry. I mean, I've lived through two evocations of Mary Berry. She was around when I was young, and it was all freezer food then. And now of course, she's come back and you know, had a renaissance. And thank goodness, because she's got a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge to impart still, and she's very good at it. So I would recommend Jane Grigson's books because they've got lots of unusual recipes in there. Not weird or mad or anything, just things you maybe haven't thought of doing. But above all, they're a good read. I often take it to bed and read it in bed because it's not stodgy. It's not a stodgy read. You can just really immerse yourself in the sort of dawn of what our food tastes are today and the way people prepared them and what they did with them. And it's very entertaining and very informative. It wasn't what I expected to read at all, because by the time you get to it being ubiquitous, you think it's always been so, but it made me stop and think back to my childhood and the dreaded salad. So that's just one little bit of research I did, because as I say, there isn't really anything that I can tell you about chilies itself, except obviously they have the irritant in them. The thing that makes it hot is the capsaicin, which is, if you get it on your hands, you know, it can be highly irritant to some people, more so than others. It can affect their breathing. It can affect their eyes, especially if you obviously touch your eyes when you've been preparing chili. So be very, very careful. Even the smallest bit can really trigger something. I'm like that with horseradish. I can't even touch it unprepared, you know, without doing anything to it. And my whole face swells up, and my eyes are just sort of little slits, and everything's streaming, you know, with the reaction to it. So you do need to take care and don't engage in these chili eating competitions. You know, who cares how many you can eat? Just get on and use. I think that's more of a man thing though. But anyway, we're going to make the sauce, and I want to get it on cooking because it doesn't just cook in 10 minutes. So everything goes into the pan except the sugar. So I'm going to put the vinegar in first. Now, I haven't measured this because at this time of year, what have I done with the vinegar? Oh, there it is. At this time of year, if you have vinegar out uncovered, you will very, very quickly get lots of little tiny black flies, like fruit flies, all around it. It's the vinegar fly. And any of you that make homemade wine will know all about the curse of the vinegar fly. But of course, as soon as they smell it, they're here. So I don't measure it out till I need it. And I'm going to switch on my pan as well, so that as soon as it hits the pan, it can be, oops, the shot's going to fall in as well. Remember what I said the other day, if you use these big things of vinegar, if you turn it on its side, it doesn't splash everywhere. If you try and pour it that way round, you'll get covered in vinegar. Then you'll also be covered in the vinegar fly. So I'll put that down there. I'm using cider vinegar, my sort of favourite go-to. So that's going into the pan. And the next thing I'm going to do is prepare the hardest ingredient, which is the apple. I mean, it's not that much harder, but it's going to need a bit more cooking than the others. So I'll just run through my standard way of prepping the apple, which is to cut it in half. You can peel it how you like, but my hands aren't very big and I'm not very good at sort of going around like this, because I end up either taking a slice off my thumb or dropping the apple. Then I cut it round. If you could just look down there. I cut it avoiding the core as much as possible. So you end up with sort of like orange segments. Then the last piece has the core in it, and you can just slice it down the middle and get rid of it. So you don't have a lot of digging about to do to get rid of the core. Then you've got your segment here. If you run the knife down under the skin, you have minimal apple wastage, and your slice is good to go. And then I just cut it across. I'm not chefy, I don't have those skills, but I do kind of find ways of, if you like, this is a very big apple, if you miss a bit, just do the same again. Some of the big ones, you can't do it all in one go. That goes in, and it can get cooking as soon as the temperature comes up. If you've got a lot of apples to do, I find this is the least tiring way of doing it, to be honest. Elizabeth says, do I know if the cooking apples are Granny Smith in the United States? I don't. If you've got Granny Smith there, I think that would be your cooking apple, because it is here, and we've got brownies as well. Or our Granny Smiths, those very hard green eating apples. I think somebody's just going to look for you. We're not quite in the season of cooking apples yet. They are coming along. I've got some trees in the garden, and they're very well laden, but they're not ready to use yet. So these have probably been in some sort of nasty storage somewhere or other, but never mind. Because they will oxidize if you leave them out in the air. So as soon as you've taken the peel off, to stop them going brown, just pop them in the pan, and they should be okay. If you can't cook them straight away, and for some reason you've prepped them beforehand, just put some lemon juice or citric acid into a bowl of water and put them in that, and it should prevent any discoloration. And that's true of any other vulnerable fruit or veg, like pears are very susceptible to that. The Granny Smith is a tip-bearing apple cultivar. Well, we need to know whether it's a cooking apple or not. That's what we need to know. Go on.
Are the apples you're using tart?
Yes, they are. They're very tart. They're very, you wouldn't want to really eat them. Rachel says, what would happen if I felt lazy and left the skins on? You won't be able to follow my super tip coming up, Rachel. That's what will happen. I don't know is the answer. I've not made it with the skins on. Because for a sauce like this, you will need to use a cooking apple, because you need it to cook down to a pulp, and eating apples just don't in the main. Right. Oh. Oh, I'm always doing that. I put the wrong thing in the wrong pan. Yes, Elizabeth, these are Bramley's, which is sort of my go-to cooking apple, really. It's bugging me now about Granny Smith. I think I have an idea. It's a very green eating apple. Right, we're on the last bit of the last apple. Turn that down a little bit, otherwise it'll be boiling madly before I've got the other things in. Right, now I'm going to do the tomatoes. And these I'm not going to peel and I'm not going to de-seed them or anything like that. I don't see the point. I'm going to be blending it into the sauce. So anything that I remove from the tomato just means less sauce, really. So in my no waste mind or hat on, then you can just cut them into quarters and put them in the pan. Got 500 grams of tomatoes here. You can use any tomatoes that you want to. I mean, it's nice to get a well-flavoured one if you can. My tomatoes as well are not ready in the garden, but you know, they will be sooner or later. So again, just cutting across 1, 2, sometimes 3 slices through, depending on the size of the tomato. Okay, so they can go in. Now I'm going to do the chilies. I'm going to keep 1 chili, but my plastic gloves are over in my work kitchen, and I've of course forgotten to get them. So when I have to chop up chili, and I haven't got gloves, I hold the stalk end and I just chop across, going up the body. Again, it doesn't have to be tiny because it's going to be blended, and I don't worry to take the seeds out because they have a certain amount of heat to them. And where's my bowl? Oh, I'll put that in there. They always smell like bell peppers do. They always smell so lovely and clean, I think, chilies. So you end up with a little sort of stalk on it there. Oops. bigger the chili, it's sort of the less hot they are. Once they get down to the smaller ones, they tend to get hotter and hotter. So you wouldn't necessarily need this much for the sauce. You know, you can judge it for yourself according to how hot you would like it. Would this chili sauce qualify as a spicy ketchup, like to dip French fries? Well, yes, in a way, although it will depend on the variety of chili that you use. I mean, if you use really hot ones like Scotch bonnets or something, it won't be, it will be hot. But I think this would be sort of pleasant, you know, if you don't want to always be not tasting the rest of your food, then this would be fine. So I'm going to put that in the pan, those in the pan as well. There we go, seeds and all. Now the other things I've got here are 4 teaspoons of dry mustard powder. Now I have been very merry-berry tonight, and I have actually measured these out because I have these things in great big tubs, and you don't really want to look at me getting those sorted out. So I'm going to put the mustard powder in, and I've got 2 teaspoonfuls of lovely sea salt there, and that's going in. So in our sauce, we will have the preservatives are vinegar, which is in the majority. We have sugar, which we'll be putting in a bit, which comes next, and the salt as well. So that, you know, you've got all the preservatives in there. The quantity of chilies is, oh goodness, 380 grams or 12 ounces. But I have kept one out, but that's just because I'm going to show you something else. You can put more or less, it doesn't matter. Yes, that's right. 380 grams of chilies to a kilo of apples is what I'm doing. So the last thing to go in, I'm just going to let that soften down a little bit. Well, it's not the last because we've still got to put the sugar in, but the other ingredient I have in this is passata. Now, I use that in some sauces because it gives a very good base, smooth base to the whole thing without putting lots and lots and lots of fresh tomatoes in, which introduce, frankly, a lot of water, which isn't quite such a nice base for a sauce. You know, the passata has already got lovely texture to it, and I'm going to show you next week how to make it quite easily at home. So we won't go through that now, but my passata has a lot of flavour in it already. So I'm going to put in, how much is it? It's 300 ml or 10 fluid ounces. And you can see the consistency and the colour of it there. It's not the bright red commercial passata because it's got other ingredients. It hasn't just got tomatoes, but I put it in these smaller jars because that's the sort of quantity I use most for our own meals. So I'm going to put that, that's why I'm using 2. I'll put that in. And this one. You can, of course, buy it. You can just buy a box of it or a bottle of it. You don't have to have homemade. You know, as I've told you, I'm not the ingredients inspector. You use what's convenient for you and what suits you. Right, stir that so that it's all nice and mixed round. Yeah. Trev's just pointing out that I didn't put as that many chilies into ours because we just like a spicy ketchup. So, but the recipe is for 380 grams, and that makes a really great sauce that, you know, people like my son love, which he loves chilies. And I mean, if you're buying a chili sauce or making a chili sauce, that's what you want. You want that heat. You want it to be how you want it. So, but I don't put so much in because neither of us. I can't eat a lot of spicy food, and Trev doesn't particularly like it. So, you know, I've reduced them. So those can go. So if you don't have passata, what can you add? You can add more tomatoes, or you could add a couple of tins of chopped tomatoes if you can get those, because they're, or sometimes you can get them in a tomato sauce base, chopped tomatoes, which just gives that the sauce extra body. I just find if you put too many fresh tomatoes in, then it all gets a bit wet. And not very tomatoey flavored. So that's cooking nicely. We'll put the sugar in a moment. Keep my chili there. Now I've got these, the peel here and the core that I put to one side, and I've got a pan about half full of water, cold water, and I'm going to put the peel in there because when we were talking about making the herb jellies, I mentioned this, and I just wanted to show you, this is the time of year where this is coming into play. So for this one product that you're making, you're actually you could get 2 or even 3. So if you decide to make a chili jelly, you can put the chili ends in with your apple bits, and that will help to flavor the base jelly. So you put those into there, and then you cook it all for excuse me, it's the vinegar. You cook it all for about on a medium sort of heat for about 45 minutes. It doesn't really matter about the water. You just need to cover the peel, basically. I mean, don't have it right up to the top because the jelly will be too weak, but that's about right like that. And you can cook that, and all the pectin. Apples are great for helping things to set that are difficult, like blackberries and things like that, because they have masses of pectin in them, in the core especially, and the skin. So it seems a shame to throw them away without doing anything with them. If you wanted to make a couple of jars of chili jelly and maybe some herb jellies or something sweet, don't put the bits of chili ends into the whole pan. You could cook the apple down, split it, and then add the chili ends for, you know, another 10 minutes or so, and keep the other bit plain. So you could then make the herb jellies like we did a couple of weeks ago. And as you go on through the autumn, you'll find you'll be thinking like that, oh, I could get 2 things from this, or maybe 3, you know, and you start to sort of think it's all a shame. It will, when it's cooked, it does a bit disgusting. It all goes a bit grey looking because all any goodness that was in the apple peel is now in the liquid. So you then just put it through a jelly bag like we've done before with the stand or on a hook on your kitchen door. Leave it to drip overnight, and then the water that you get, you measure it, and then you add equal sugar to the amount of water or apple juice that you've got. It's the same principle as we did with the herb jellies and the red currant jelly. It's all exactly the same, but it is making something out of nothing. And if you're making, what's the thing really, sort of ratatouille or something like that, that you're going to make and maybe bottle, You will end up with lots of red pepper innards and bits of courgette and all the rest of it. Just do the same thing, put it all in the pan with some apple peel, and then you can cook it all together, and it will just make a lovely savoury golden red jelly. And if you've got bits of chili ends as well, it will just have a slight heat to it. It's just nice to be able to think you can make things from nothing, I think. Right, I should do that later, Quill. I'm not going to do that now because we haven't got time. But this is cooking down nicely. I'm now going to add the sugar, which is 250 grams or 8 ounces. Now, I didn't have any light brown soft sugar. I only had muscovado. So I'm using demerara because I didn't want this to be too dark. I wanted some semblance of redness about it. So I'm using demerara. It will just take a bit longer to dissolve, that's all. So that's going in. It's got a lovely toasty sort of flavour. So we'll put that in. The other, yeah, that goes in there. Same thing as we've done before. Stir it to dissolve it so that it gets mixed in evenly. I wouldn't cut the sugar out, Elizabeth, because it's part of the preservation. The sugar is a preservative. It's not very much in the whole poundful. You've got 8 ounces in there, 250 grams, which is negligible, really. It's important to kind of maintain the preservation. Otherwise, you're going to make it and have to keep it in the fridge all the time. And I don't know about you, but my fridge isn't huge. And, you know, it just gets annoying when you've got lots of things in there that you know, you're just storing, basically. So, so we'll just cook this on for a bit. Turn the heat up slightly. Just get the sugar dissolved fully. You must not be able to feel it or hear it gritty, sort of moving around, and then just leave it because it will keep cooling down the more you stir it. I'm going to get sort of lined up with my blender, and that could go. There's my chili. Oh, I didn't say about the jelly. I saved the chili because when you make the jelly, I don't know if you remember when we did the herb jellies, we let it just settle a bit so that it didn't all rise to the top. When you've made the jelly and you're jarring up, you can just slice a chili finely with the seeds and all, and you can then stir that through the jelly. At the end, you don't need to cook it. It will just, you know, cook enough in the heat of the jelly, and then leave it for a few minutes to start to set so that the chili slices are pretty, you know, they're well distributed. Ah, onions. I didn't put the onions. Well spotted, Rachel. I'll do it now. Right, onions, yes. I've got some red onions here. You might need to cook yours on for longer than I'm going to, because otherwise they might not cook down. So I was just seeing if you were paying attention, of course. How annoying. We're going to have hard bits of onion in ours. You could put some garlic in as well if you wanted to. I like to keep it sort of on the sweet side, so I haven't, but you could do that. Oh, do this other bit. And so it can start cooking. It shouldn't take too long to cook. I ought to have a take two facility, you know, so we can wind it back and add in anything I've forgotten. Hey ho, it's real life. Let's get rid of those. Get the chili out of the way. Ready for my jelly. I think the chili jelly, if you do it in quite small jars, it makes a great hamper ingredient. And, you know, because people often haven't seen anything like that. So, and also it hasn't really cost you anything, which is even better. And you can use it as well if you make something like a savoury flan or something like that, like a quiche. You can always glaze it with the chili jelly. Just melt it slightly and brush it over the top. Right. Get these out of the way. Yes, you can use white or yellow onions. I try to use an onion that matches the rest of my ingredients, so which is why I used eventually red onion. But you can use whatever you've got. It won't really. I think the red onions are slightly sweeter, aren't they? It's just, again, it's all subjective, really. So we leave those cooking for a moment. I'm going to get organised for the next bit. I'm going to use a clean pan when I do the processing, but you could do it into a jug and something like that, and then put it back in the same pan. It doesn't have to be clean in that sense. But get my bottles as well. I like to use these little dumpy milk, what are called milk bottles here. As you know, they're 250 ml capacity, which is how much? 250 ml, about 4 by 20, about 5 fluid ounces. They're a nice size to, you know, they're not too big, and they're nice and stable. They're not easy, you don't knock them over as easily as the taller ones, which are the same capacity, but being tall and thin, it's very easy, especially like me. I'm always going like this, and it can, you know, end up with a sort of accident. So I like to use them, and they're easy to fill. They haven't got sort of funny shoulders on them and everything that makes it tricky. I've got my sieve. Now I'm going to sieve it. Once I've processed it, I'm going to sieve it, just because if there's any residual lumps, if the processing, if the blending hasn't completely smoothed it out. But if you're happy for the occasional lump, then you can just process it and put it straight into the pan or into your jug, you know, so that you can then put it back in the pan. You really need to heat it up again before you bottle it. You don't want to, because it will cool. It won't feel cool, but when you're processing and leaving it, it's not being bottled at the highest temperature. So it's best to reheat it just so it's bubbling and then put it into the bottles. You avoid having to water bath it that way. While those onions are softening, otherwise I'm going to end up with those in my sieve. I'll just tell you about next week, which is our last week of the summer term. It seems unbelievable that it's gone by so fast, but we will be making a similar, doing a similar process, making tomato ketchup. And I'll also be showing you how to make the passata. I wouldn't attempt to try and cook along with me for that, but you can do the ketchup. But the passata is something really that is ideal when you've got lots of tomatoes around, either if you've grown them or if you've got a friend with an allotment or a garden, because people always grow too many for what they need and are often trying to offload them onto people. So I find it the most versatile thing probably that I make in the whole year. It's a base for soups and bolognese and all sorts of sauces, and it's well worth making. And I'll show you how I make mine next week and what I do, how I bottle it and everything. This apple is softening nicely. I don't know that the same can be said of the onions, but anyway. You see, the apple's a funny thing. When it's cooking in something, it looks like it's still solid, but when you just touch it with the spoon, it just disintegrates, and that's what you need in a cooking apple, is for that to happen. Because they're often the base with lots of chutneys. They're included because they have that property. Now, Rachel, I would cook yours on a bit to let the onions soften. But I'm going to carry on so that we don't run over too much. But you can catch up afterwards because you'll need to let the onions cook. So I've got my blender here. Yeah, if you cook it on, you'll have a better result than I'm going to. Right, so I'm going to turn this, I'm not going to turn it off, I'm going to turn it down, and I'm going to take it off the heat and start to blend it. Got my big blender here. I've no idea. It's best to do it in batches, not fill the goblet up too high, otherwise you end up being smothered in red hot liquid. It's best to just do a bit at a time, although it's annoying to have to keep stopping and starting. Put the lid on properly, that will help. Put the top on. Have some blending noise. Where are we? Make sure it's all turned down. And I can turn it up. Right, what I'm going to do is 2 lots of this, so because I also want to cook mine on to cook the onions, so I don't want it all to be, you know, not right. So I'll do 1 more lot like this, but what I'm going to do is pour this through the sieve into this other pan. So you can pour it into anything that you've got that it will fit, and we'll see how many lumps we've still got. It's worth doing because it just makes a nicer sauce. Is that going to stay on there? That's it. You put the finger on it. That will keep it there. I'll just do another amount. Spray underneath. Oh, there's my lid. Right. So I've got a spoon. I'll just stir that to get it to go through the sieve. It shouldn't be too difficult. You see underneath. Go through the next bit. As I say, you don't have to sieve it. You can just put it straight back on to reheat and thicken up a bit. You want to get it to the consistency that you want it to be. I don't worry about it being a little bit sort of runny. You're not trying to make or put Heinz out of business, you know, you're just making something lovely to eat. So as I say, if you don't want to do this bit, you can just put it straight back on and reheat it and let it sort of bubble for 5 minutes or so, I would say. you can see it underneath, lovely and glossy. A few bits of onion in there, as we knew there would be. Not as much as I thought. Whoops. So I'm going over the side, but never mind. That's your bit. Anyway, it doesn't take very long to do that bit. And you can keep going until there's virtually nothing in the sieve, except any lumpy bits. And I always run the spatula on the base of the sieve because you can see how much is on there. So I always scrape that off. And if I do something really thick, like a fruit puree, then I'll do that throughout the process. Otherwise it all gets clogged up and you can't actually push anything through. There's a bit more to do there, but I'll do that when I do the next lot here. Over my first pan. Okay, so that's going back onto the heat. Just move that to the front. I'll probably need the ladle back in a minute. Just to reheat. And you can see the consistency, or you will be able to in a moment, and it thickens up when it cools as well slightly. So just coming back to bubble, which is what we need to see. And you must be careful when it's like this because it's a bit like a hot geyser, you know, it will bubble and spit in if you're not careful. You don't want to get caught with it on your skin. So I've got my bottles there ready. I've got my heat mat ready. You can see tiny little flecks of chili in there. And this is the consistency. The only thing to be wary of, if you're going to gift it to somebody, just say to them it's not like Heinz or a commercial ketchup. When you open the bottle, it will pour. It won't set in a kind of way that you've got to use something to get it out of the bottle. You don't want them to sort of open it and go like this and it ends up all over the meal. So I'll just go on and show you the bottling bit. Over there, I've got my ladle, I've got my funnel, and it's the same old ladle into the bottles. It's a lovely colour as well, and a nice pouring consistency, but it will, as I say, become thicker as it cools. And then we're going to fill the bottle right to the top. So that we can put the lid on. And as it cools, it will shrink, it will form a vacuum. So you will vacuum pack your sauce naturally. You don't have to do anything else to it. And it will stay in good condition until you open it, and then you can put it in the fridge if you want to, but it isn't really necessary. It's got enough preservative in there for you to just store it on the shelf. So don't worry if a gap appears at the top. It's just, it shrinks as it cools. And let's do another one. Well, I've got it hot on that as well. Get it into the bottles. And then it's, as I've said before, don't just think, oh, well, I've got to have this on whatever, you know, on a burger or something. Think of ways to use it that you can use it as an ingredient. You could use it as a base sauce for, you know, put some into a casserole or into bolognese or making a chili. Use this as your tomato sauce and add the other ingredients to it. You can stir it through mayonnaise like we did the other relish, and then use that as a dip for, as you said before, chips or barbecue meat. You could brush it on as a marinade, and before cooking on the barbecue, that kind of thing. Don't just sort of think, oh, I've got to use it, you know. Use it in a sandwich. If you've got some nice cold meats or cheese and you're making sandwiches, just spread it on as a spread. It's just because it says it's a sauce, you know, don't let it stop you doing other things with it. Right, well, that's 3 nice bottles made, and the other half I'll just cook on in a moment and make sure the onions are softened. Sorry about that. And do the same process again, and I'll end up with about 6 bottles of a lovely chili sauce, which I hope you will think is easy to try and do. And it's just another one of those things that it's showing you a process, and by using apples as a base, you get a nice bland sort of base mix that you can then flavor with other things, and chili is ideal for that, because chilies of themselves, you've got to use a lot of them to make a chili sauce just from chilies. So, and it's just nice to have that sort of smooth texture, I think. So it's a way of showing you another technique that can become versatile. And also, if you make the chili jelly, you've got the 2-for-1. I'm just seeing if I've got one here. I don't think I have, with the chilies in. I'll get it for next week, just to remind you how it looks with the chilies in there suspended. It just looks very pretty and is a great hamper addition. So I'll see you next week for the last one of this series, and we'll be making tomato ketchup, and I'll be showing you how to make passata, which once the tomatoes have all ripened, I know you'll want to do. Thank you for listening.